So we are now coming up on almost 4 years since Apple debuted their Apple Watch Ultra back in September of 2022. And since that time, I've used an Apple Watch Ultra pretty much every single day. And I wanted to give you guys my long-term thoughts and reviews of this Apple Watch because while it's an amazing piece of hardware, it's an amazing watch, and I love using this thing every single day, a little part of me thinks that I actually don't need this Apple Watch, and that's what makes this long-term review interesting. So sit back, relax, let's talk all things Apple Watch Ultra and whether or not you need to get one. But now, before we continue, if you do enjoy videos like this one where we review all things Apple and their hardware and software products, definitely consider subscribing to the channel and help us get to 1 million subscribers by the end of the year. But now let's talk about the Apple Watch Ultra and what makes it an Ultra versus a regular series Apple Watch. So there are 4 main things about the Apple Watch Ultra that make it an Ultra and not a regular series Apple Watch. The first one is going to be the display, of course. This is a larger device, you have a bigger display, especially if you're looking at the Apple Watch Ultra 3, which released late last year. It is a nice 49 to 51 millimeter diagonal display that gives you a beautiful brightness of up to 3000 nits of brightness, depending on which Apple Watch Ultra you're looking at. So that's going to be the biggest headliner and the biggest difference between the Ultra and the non-Ultra. Then you'll of course have the more rugged build. It's made out of titanium, it looks more rugged, it looks like it's meant to actually take a beating, and even though I have the black titanium one, and people thought that that color would chip, and it is anodized titanium, meaning that the color is pretty much fused into that titanium, and for a year and a half of me using this black titanium Apple Watch, it has no scuffs or scratches or discolorations, and I have put it through some situations where any other product would have some color chipping. Another difference is that you do have an extra control with the action button, so depending on who you are, that could be very valuable moving forward for quick access controls to maybe a third-party application or something else. And then lastly, the big headliner is going to be the longer battery life. You get anywhere from 36 to, I believe now 80 hours of battery life, depending on what modes you're in, which Apple Watch you have, and you're able to extend it in low power mode. So if you want an Apple Watch that's going to last you much longer than the anticipated day compared to the regular Apple Watches, then yes, the Apple Watch Ultra will be for you. And the final thing here, which is kind of like a yes and no difference, is that all Apple Watch Ultras come with cellular data built in. There is no non-data version of an Apple Watch Ultra. Versus the Apple Watch series, you do have a non-data versus a data version Apple Watch. And then of course, the way that these Apple Watches are marketed, the Apple Watch Ultra is marketed for, you know, the divers of the world, the hikers, the extreme skydivers, people that are in extreme conditions, extreme weathers, and they're going to be away from, you know, electricity and connectivity for a long time. So that is what the Apple Watch Ultra is sold for. And what I'm learning here over the last 4 years of me having an Apple Watch is that, again, I'm not using any of the extreme stuff, and that's what's going to kind of tailor this long-term review. I ended up purchasing the Apple Watch Ultra because of course I make videos like this one and I wanted to test out what Apple had to offer from its latest and greatest, and of course its most expensive version of the Apple Watch. The Apple Watch Ultra is everything that Apple has and is able to put into the Apple Watch from a tech perspective, hardware perspective, and of course software perspective. And back then in 2022, I was coming from an Apple Watch Series 5, which already had a pretty diminished battery life and it was dwindling. And the Apple Watch Series 5 was already showing signs of it maybe kind of tearing down, which albeit it still turns on, it still charges, and it still works. Of course, not using the latest Watch OS, but an Apple Watch Series 5 to this day in 2026 is still functioning. But I wanted to see what it was like to use Apple's best Apple Watch and something that would last me long term moving forward, and that's what made me decide to go with the Apple Watch Ultra back in 2022 instead of an Apple Watch Series 7 or 8, which is what they had back then. So now let's get into my review and what I love about this Apple Watch Ultra and how it kind of meshed into my life day to day. So to reiterate, I am using the black titanium Ultra 2. I decided not to upgrade to the Ultra 3. I didn't need the larger display because that was pretty much the only difference. And then it also had some SOS connectivity features, which if you are one of those extreme hikers and divers and people that are out in the wilderness for hours on end or days on end, then yes, that SOS feature will be extremely beneficial for you if you have an Apple Watch Ultra 3. But for me, the Ultra 2, it already had everything that I needed. And if anything, I kind of miss my Ultra 1 because it has the blood oxygen sensor, which this one, even though it has it, the way that it reads it is a little bit different now because of Apple's lawsuit, but that's a story for another day. There are a few main things I use my Apple Watch Ultra for. Of course, I use it for the fitness aspects. That's what I probably use it most intensely for because, again, it's an Apple Watch Ultra. I like to be able to track my workouts. I love all the new functionality that comes in the fitness application. So that's the main reason I use it, for working out and as well for long runs. And the reason that I wanted to do the data version and why I like the Ultra with data is because, of course, I'm able to take my Apple Watch with me without bringing my iPhone. So I just have my Apple Watch in my AirPods, and not only am I tracking my workout, doing all the GPS tracking, I'm also getting all my health tracking features, but then, of course, I have data, so I'm able to play my Spotify and listen to whatever music I see fit without bringing an iPhone with me. I've also grown to love some of those other features which I didn't use before. For instance, dictation has gotten very good with watchOS and being able to send out text messages in real time without needing to actually get into my Apple Watch or use my iPhone. I've also been using that double tap feature more and more because I'm in a situation now with 2 kids where I usually have my hands full. So a quick double tap to hit a reply on a text message is something that I'm using more and more, which I thought was a feature that would be a gimmick for me, but I am using it now with my Apple Watch Ultra 2. Another big thing that I've been using more and more recently is all those wellness applications like the Vitals app, as well as the sleep tracking. The sleep tracking came first with the Apple Watch, and it took me about a day or 2 to get used to sleeping with my Apple Watch Ultra because, again, it is a large device, and if you're not used to sleeping with a big rugged watch, then it'll be a little bit uncomfortable. But after the second or third night, it kind of just disappeared into my wrist, and now I use it pretty much every single night for sleep tracking, albeit sometimes I use just this ring that I have right here, this Lunar ring, which I like to use for sleep tracking as well, but I like to keep it most accurate with my Apple Watch Ultra. And then the Vitals application has also been wonderful. For instance, about 2 weeks ago, I ended up getting the flu, I had a fever, and my Apple Watch saw that fever coming 2 days early and noticed that my wrist temperature was getting a little higher, that my heart rate was getting a little higher in my sleep, more than normal, and then 2 days later, I had 101 fever, and I was out for the count for about 3 or 4 days. And you can see that the Vitals app was all out of whack, saying like, all right, you're sick, all these temperatures are out of whack, your breathing is heavy, you're not sleeping enough. So all that, it was good to know that, hey, I gotta get ready, let's load up on some vitamins and get ready to go for this flu season, which was good to know that we were able to pass and survive it. And then another big thing that I love with my Apple Watch Ultra is going to be for a lot of workflow and just efficiency things. So for instance, if I'm trying to get into my iPhone, or if I'm trying to get into my iPad, or even trying to get into my Mac, it'll auto unlock because it knows that I have my Apple Watch on me. Same thing goes with filling out passwords and things like that. It's just all this Apple ecosystem stuff that happens with the Apple Watch tied into it is fantastic to have. And then secondly, I used to use the viewfinder on the Apple Watch a ton. Back when I would use my iPhone as my main camera for the YouTube channel, so I would be able to pull up the camera on my iPhone and view everything on my Apple Watch, be able to take photos, take videos, be able to zoom in, zoom out, and just use it to kind of frame myself while being able to use the main camera and not needing to use a selfie camera. So that was a feature that I used for years on a daily basis. I am using it a little less here and there, but of course that's something that a lot of people don't really know even exists at this point. And then again, from a design standpoint, I do love the design of the Apple Watch Ultra, especially in the black titanium color, because it kind of meshes into my workflow a little bit more, it meshes into my look. And also when it comes to the display, when the display is off, it just looks like everything is blacked out and turned off, versus with that natural titanium color, even when the display was fully off, it would still feel like there's just kind of this screen on your wrist. And again, the design for right now has been timeless, and Apple hasn't changed the design at all in the 4 years or 4 iterations of the Apple Watch Ultra being out. And then when it comes to all those smartwatch features like the notifications and things like that, I'm actually using those less and less because I'm trying not to treat my Apple Watch as a secondary phone. I'm trying to treat my Apple Watch as a fitness device that just happens to also get notifications. So for the most part, I've turned off all notifications minus a couple of important ones like messages from my wife and things like that. So for the most part, I've turned off the notifications because I'm done at like raising my wrist and getting distracted every time a notification comes in. And then from a day-to-day use, from a battery perspective, I get almost 2 full days of battery on my Apple Watch Ultra with at least one 1-hour workout in each of those days. Again, some days it's a little bit less, some days it's a little bit more, but I can give myself about a day and a half overall of battery life without needing to charge it. And if I go into low power mode, I can easily extend it to that 3rd day. And this is with an Apple Watch that's already over a year old. Again, this is the Apple Watch Ultra 2 that released in September of 2024. So if I got a brand new one, I should be able to get even more battery life. And the Apple Watch Ultra 3 does extend that battery life past that 36 hours. And that was one of the selling points going from the Ultra 2 to the Ultra 3. But now, as you're hearing all these statements in my review and what I like about the Apple Watch Ultra and things that come with it, you might be noticing that none of the features and benefits and things that I use it for are actually Ultra features, right? Maybe I use the action button every now and then to quickly jump into a workout instead of going into the workout application, so I save maybe 2 or 3 steps and kind of a little bit less friction into starting that workout. But outside of that, and outside of maybe the battery life, I'm not using any of the Ultra features. I'm not using any of the GPS features, any of the hiking features, the diving features. Sometimes if I jump into a pool and I'm in Florida, it's cool that the diving feature and how deep I'm going turns on automatically. So I'm able to see that maybe I'm 6 feet underneath the water. But outside of that, there's no real benefit to me having the Ultra. Every single thing that I mentioned, from the workout to the Vitals app to the health applications to all the ecosystem features to the viewfinding, everything can be done on a regular Series Apple Watch. And even some of the older ones, like I can get an Apple Watch Series 9 and still get all the features that I mentioned with no worries whatsoever. Even some of those exclusive features that were first on the Apple Watch Ultra 2, like the double tap feature that didn't come to the Apple Watch Series until a future iteration, are now there on the Apple Watch Series. So there aren't really any exclusive features on the Apple Watch Ultra that the Apple Watch Series doesn't have anymore. aside from, again, larger display and longer battery life, which are more hardware and not software. And then to really zoom out, I was trying to look at some of the sales data to see how many people have Apple Watches and how many people have Apple Watch Ultras. Because out in the wild, yes, I see a couple of Apple Watch Ultras here and there, but for the most part, I'm looking and I'm seeing regular Apple Watches, and I'm even seeing Apple Watch SEs and smaller Apple Watches and older ones, and the sales numbers kind of show that. About 20% of all Apple Watch sales are Apple Watch Ultra sales, 12% are about Apple Watch SE sales, and everything else is a regular Apple Watch. So anywhere from Apple Watch Series 9, 10, or 11 makes up about 65 to 75% of all Apple Watch sales. So I'm not alone in thinking that, hey, the Apple Watch Ultra for most people is overkill. So to round off my review, it is going to be a positive review of the Apple Watch Ultra. I love this thing, I wouldn't trade it for the world, but I'm noticing more and more that it's more about an aesthetic and a look kind of purchase decision versus an actual features and purchasing decision, because these Apple Watches all do the same exact thing at the end of the day. All the main features that I use an Apple Watch for can be used and done on an older Apple Watch or a Series 11 Apple Watch with no problems whatsoever. So the purchasing decision comes down to three main things. It comes down to which design you like better, how much battery life you need, and whether or not you're going to be using the Ultra features at the end of the day. And that one isn't even a big purchasing decision when dealing with an Apple Watch Ultra. But one thing I will say when it comes to the purchasing decision is that yes, a brand new Apple Watch Ultra is $800, but right now you can get an Apple Watch Ultra 2 for $550 brand new from Amazon, and at that price point, now we're talking about maybe a different kind of situation, because an Apple Watch Series 11 is about $400, you add data to it, you get it a little bit more expensive, and then you're dealing at that same $550 price point, and at that point, I'd rather have an Apple Watch Ultra 2 than Apple Watch Series 11 if price is the same. But at $800, these days it's hard to justify, and I do think this year when Apple does release from Apple Watch Series 12 or whatever they're going to release, I might be going to the smaller iteration and foregoing getting a new Apple Watch Ultra. But that's just my 2 cents, everybody. Let me know in the comment down below what you think. Are you an Apple Watch Ultra user? Are you a regular Apple Watch user? Do you have an Apple Watch SE? Do you care for the Apple Watch? Are you in the same sentiment where you just got the Apple Watch Ultra because it was the biggest and baddest one, but you actually don't use any of those Apple Watch Ultra features? Which is nothing wrong with that. Your purchasing decision is your purchasing decision, and you might just like the look and the feel and how rugged this is, because I do love the Apple Watch Ultra and I do recommend it to people. It's just that don't get it thinking you're going to be using it for all those Ultra features. Get it for the aesthetic, the battery life, and the display. But that'll do it, everybody. If you made it to the end, leave a little dolphin. Let me know in the comment down below what you think. If you want to watch more videos like this one, check out one of these videos right here. And until next time, I'm Fernando. Peace, everyone. Apple Watch Ultra. It's a sick device, but not everybody needs it.